While I was home in Dallas, before I start this thing, I wrote this big, long thing here. And Mr. Lacey, I think I'll just leave it laying up here because everything we just said up here. Come on up here, Joy. First thing, Joy, and I would like to do is, so an honored occasion to be able to come up here, thank my cousin Charlie, his wife Sally, Gloria, another cousin, who nominated my dad for this prestigious award. I really think Dad deserves it. Charlie worked really hard on this, and I think the family did too. And it's an honor for Joy and I to come up here and do this. I don't have a bunch of shirts and hats and stuff. Yeah, I could have. But Joy and I have enjoyed a great history of aviation through our father. Let's just, Joy, let's start with, we did bring one thing, and this isn't a hat, and you can't read it from out there, but I'll tell you, it says, Charles Lindbergh did it. He flew the Atlantic in the Spirit of St. Louis in 1927. My dad was 11 years old then. And I'm going to tell you, there were probably thousands of people in Forest Park, and my cousin Charlie took us out there and drove us around Forest Park today. And I don't know how you keep from getting lost out there. I just kept my eyes closed and went where we went. But anyway, this is a matter that my grandmother and my grandfather bought for my dad when he was 11 years old, and he saw Charles Lindbergh fly around Forest Park, and the story was, Tommy, he was waving only at me. So from that time forward, my dad fell in love with aviation, fell in love with model airplanes, and lo and behold, married a woman by the name of Gay Cunningham, who also attended Rittner High School. Joy's been singing their fight song several times today, or cheers, whatever you call it. And I want to make sure my mom gets her credit because she went through years of making coffee for my dad and all his friends who showed up in the shop to help him design and build Little Toot. My dad built model airplanes through his early years. He was damn good at it. And ended up building museum models for museums here in St. Louis and Smithsonian. Beautiful, beautiful scale models. He flew model airplanes against Carl Goldberg, a famous modeler whose kids are put out in local hobby shops, and actually beat Carl Goldberg one year. But it was probably during my mom and dad's anniversary, honeymoon. And Dad had this airplane. We've heard, Joy and I have heard this story hundreds of times. That Dad built this airplane to beat Carl Goldberg. One day, the airplane's sitting there ready to fly in this contest, and some airplane comes spinning into the ground. My mother's standing right there, and she jumped to the side and jumped on his airplane. Which Mom said, don't know how we ever made it after that. But I want you to know that I'm ad-libbing because I had all this written down here, but not what I'm telling you. So anyway, as time went on, Mom and Dad had a little boy named George. We named after my dad, Pensacola, and ended up going to Seattle, Washington, and that's when I was born. and then moved to Corpus, and then Joy was born. I'm not going to give you dates. That's too hard. So anyway, in 1951, Dad decided that, he told me, he says, Tommy, you know, I can build model airplanes, and I'm a darn good metalsmith, and I've learned how to be a metalsmith. He worked for Curtis Wright here in Missouri, and he became an artist in metals. He said, you know, I think I can build my own airplane. And Dad taught me a couple, 2 or 3 things when he was growing up. I'm sure he taught Joy too. First thing he taught me was, fake it till you make it, son. Don't ever tell anybody that you can't do anything. And the second thing was, if you don't have time to do it right the first time, when would you have time to do it over? Time is money. And the third thing was, I think I forgot the third thing. Oh, no. He said, if you make a commitment to yourself in building your own airplane, which is a major, major, major feat, you have to make 2 commitments, one to yourself and one to your airplane, and you can't break either one of them because both of them fight each other. And that's something I never forgot. But in 1951, gosh, how old were we?
Babies.
Young. There were nights when my dad was designing a little tube, and I'd be out there tugging on his coattails to do something other than draw drawings on the airplane, and he'd shove me off and say, it's time for you to go to bed. Because he was in deep thought about how he was going to build this real aerobatic airplane. And there were many nights like that. There were many nights of him beating on metal in all hours of the night, just disturbing neighbors and really making some people upset. But lo and behold, and Joy knows this, there's so many different aspects to building your own airplane. And people ask, how in the world, where do you know to start? How do you do this? You build one part at a time and you set it over here. And you build another part and you set it over here. And then all of a sudden you start bringing all these parts together. And it becomes a creation. So, and Joy knows about rib stitching too, that you have to rib stitch every inch of that fabric on the wing, on every rib. It takes hours upon hours upon hours. And if Dad ever got paid for building a little tube, he said he probably wouldn't pay 20 cents an hour. 6 years of work, February of 1957, little tube was done. We hauled it to an airport called Cudahy Field in Corpus Christi. And by golly, my dad barely had a pilot's license then. Very young pilot, didn't have many flying hours, so he had a woman by the name of Pauline Glasson fly a little tube and test fly a little tube. And there's a long story behind that, but it was a glorious day. The airplane flew perfect, and Dad asked her and her husband, who also flew it, what he needed to do to correct this airplane. And they said, just leave it alone. And Claude Glasson, I can remember laying on the asphalt, laying down and watching him at 10,000 feet doing every maneuver that that airplane could do. Brought it back and says, do not touch this airplane, leave it alone. And so the next major feat Dad did was, he said, well, you know, I've been helping Paul Poporizny, who is EAA #1 at AirAdventure, Oshkosh, Wisconsin, develop chapters all over the United States. My dad was the original 100 members of the Experimental Aircraft Association. And now there's over 100 million people. They had the wrong number on the screen here. Belonging to EAA, and his number is 64. And when the Poporiznis knew that my dad passed away in 1982, they gave me number 64. And it's an honor to have that number. But I want to back up one little bit here. Enjoy, then you can talk or say whatever you want. But they didn't have GPS back in those days in 1957. My dad had to climb aboard Little Toot with no navigational equipment other than a compass, and he flew to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and he followed railroad tracks, and he landed here at Lindbergh Field, and a long time ago, Lindbergh Field wasn't very big then. And then he went on into Milwaukee, got in all kinds of trouble in Milwaukee, landed in a rainstorm and got in trouble with the FAA, and then on the way home he ended up landing in a little town called LaPorte, Texas. He couldn't find the airport there either, so he decided to land on a highway, Interstate 10. This is such a great story. He said, you know, I'm going to put this thing down before I tear it up, and I'll get fuel somewhere. Lo and behold, Interstate 10 sitting out there, and they were just building it. And he said, well, I'll just land on Interstate 10. There's a little fuel truck down there. I'll just land on Interstate 10. So he did, but you guys know that there's lightning arrestor lines that run across highways. They're little bitty things about as big as your finger. Just so happened there was a guy on a pole there hooking up these lines. Little Toot flew right through that line. And it bent that pole over, but it didn't snap. And back in those days, those guys put these cleats on their shoes and put this big strap around their belly and climb the pole.
Old cats.
Well, can you imagine a cartoon with this guy holding on to this pole going like this? Anyway, I could have killed him, but it didn't, and it was great. But the foreman of that crew gave Dad some fuel, and he fueled up the airplane and flew it home. Flying through the wire, they boogered the airplane up a little bit, and all that was fixed later. But then, in 1982, my father succumbed to cancer. And he said to me, just build Big Toot. And oh my gosh, I forgot something. Just build Big Toot. Let's go back a couple of steps here. How in the heck did Little Toot get named? When Little Toot was finished in 1957, my dad went in the house and says, Mom, what will we name this thing? She says, Tommy and Joy, listen to that Burr Rabbit and Burr Bear and Disney records of Big Little Toot the Tugboat. Little Toot was just a tug. Can I do this? Just a happy harbor tug, and it came from the line of tugboats fun and gay. It just seemed that Little Toot just didn't give a hoot. And he tried, but he couldn't behave. And so he said, we'll name it Little Toot, and we'll go to Walt Disney, and we'll see if we can get permission to get a picture of Little Toot painted on the side of the airplane. And Disney said, no. I will draw you these beautiful whistles, and you can put those on the airplane. Well, now back to Dad passing away in 82. He said, just do me a favor. Build a two-place airplane called Big Toot. It has two seats in it rather than one. And it took 20 years for me to even get the pay grade to do it. And then it took me 15 years to do it.
Well, there's a reason for that, because he kept helping everyone else build their little toots instead of building his big toot. So it took him a while.
So right. Anyway, we finished this airplane, and I fulfilled my dad's last wishes. And I built this airplane. It looks just like Little Toot. And this last summer, we got both of those airplanes in the air. And we have a picture of Big Toot and Little Toot in formation, 61 years of aviation. And I'm glad to say that I've joined a group of people who are recognized as Hank Williams Jr., Billy Graham, Franklin Graham, George Bush Jr., Dale Earnhardt Jr., Richard Petty, Kyle Petty, Tommy Meyer, George Meyer. So, Joy and I are honored. She's only up here because
He may be.
she needs to be saying something too, but to the whole alumni of Redner High School, students and faculty and everybody that's on the honor committee, we were glad to come up here from Dallas to be a part of this and see our dad's name enshrined in the Hall of Fame. So I thank you very much. And Joy, if you have something you want to say, just get after it, girl.
Not.